Welcome, Ernest Hemingway.
It's my pleasure to be here and to have you here at the finca. You know, it was my third wife, Martha Gellhorn, who found this wonderful place. Doomed from the start we were, but we still have the finca.
Now, Martha Gellhorn, you had a chance, when did you have a chance to meet her?
I met Martha in Key West. She was a journalist, a young, attractive woman, and she came up to me in a bar and introduced herself. And
what did she introduce herself as?
she said she was a journalist doing a story. I don't remember on what now. I think I got lost in her eyes at the time, and double daiquiris, frozen, no sugar, thank you.
Did she get lost in your eyes?
I thought she did. She seemed to convince me she did. It was only after we married that I found out it probably wasn't quite that way for her. She did not want to live in my shadow, nor did I want to live in hers.
Let's go back a little bit. You were born when?
I was born July 21st, 1899 in Oak Park, Illinois.
What did your mother and dad do?
My mother, Grace, not that she had any, she was a teacher. She taught students piano. She was a singer of opera. That she thought she had a possible career. And my father was a doctor. He delivered thousands of babies.
Your mother had aspirations for you. What field of interest would she have liked you to have been in?
My mother tried to get me to play the cello. Took me out of school for a while. It didn't work. She would have liked anything other than a writer. She was not happy with that. She probably would have liked me to go into the church. My father, on the other hand, who was a great man and a great hunter, taught me about the world of hunting and the wilderness.
Did you feel like you had to please him?
You know, I don't like talking about my family. If I had written about them, I would have answered questions about them. But let me say this about my father. He didn't have a chance with my mother. No. I never thought I had to live up to his expectations. But he was a great role model. And he was a great shot, and he was a good hunter, and he was a good doctor. So there was a lot to live up to.
As were you, a great shot, a good hunter, and quite the athlete. How did you get inspired about the other thing that you're most known for is your writing? What drove you to that?
I always wanted to write. And I loved shooting. Wow. Shooting is faster than baseball. You're out on one strike. But writing's what I always wanted to do. And from my first job at the Star in Kansas City, where I learned to write a simple declarative sentence that's useful to anyone, it was a way of being able to tell the stories inside me. And I knew that if I continued on a daily basis that I could write. That was what I was meant to do, to write one true sentence, to take the truth and make it more true than it really was.
During that time period of your life, you also had this wanderlust to perhaps get in the Army. Why would you want to get involved in the Army during a period of time of global turmoil, yet here we were, the United States was pretty much isolated and then not necessarily involved?
You have to understand that in my world, Teddy Roosevelt was my hero. I wanted to be Pawnee Bill, Indian Scout. Those men represented what was good in life and what life should be about, the challenge of a victory over your enemy. It seemed clear to me that that was the choice I needed to make. I decided to see and experience it, because that's writing, to look, to listen, to learn, to understand, and then to create it again, more true than it actually was.
When you found yourself on the Italian front, what were some of the experiences that you feel like shaped you?
Amazing to think back now. It was the first experience in a completely different language. It was sight, sound, smells, foods, women, all new in my life, things I had not experienced. I was 18 years old, and that was the first time death tried to count me out. Damn near did too. July 9th, 1918, and we're camped out along the Piave River, close by Fossalta, a small town in northern Italy. I will never forget the sound of that shell. It was like a great beast ripping a path through the sky, and it left me open-mouthed and breathless, unable to breathe. That experience was an experience that shaped my life.
You had a close encounter with death, but you also saw death through the eyes of a reporter. You were first-hand experiences where, I read someplace about the fact that there was an ammunition dump that exploded, and there were people and remains, and you covered it. And when you see that firsthand, what's that do for you, for your psyche, your soul?
No war, no matter how justified, is not a crime. And I know war. I know war better than most men now living. And it has always been, to me, deplorable. And its destructiveness to both foe and friend has rendered it useless as a means of settling an international dispute. Scarred for life, that's what people say. Well, how could you not be? I couldn't sleep. I never liked the dark after that, and I never forgot what I saw. But I learned that that's what life was.
When you left and the armistice occurred and you returned back to the States, you ended up back in the Chicago area. What was it like living during the Prohibition?
It was a tough time, but those years as a reporter, I learned to see, to write what I saw, what I heard, and to tell just the simple truth of the situation. It was where I met Sherwood Anderson, who inspired me to take my new wife, Hadley, and go to Paris if I wanted to write. That's where everyone was that was doing any of the great writing of that period. And he gave me letters of introduction to the great Gertrude Stein and Ford Madox Ford, and that was my inspiration to go and focus on my writing.
Through that relationship with Gertrude Stein, you got a chance to meet some very interesting people who, it's been written up subsequently, were referred to as the lost generation. Who was involved in that group of people?
La génération perdue. Thank you, Gertrude. We were all veterans of that first great war. We were young. We seemed, in her eyes, without focus, without desire, without ambition, without ability to follow through. She thought of us as having been lost through that war. I think I was found through that war. And F. Scott Fitzgerald exemplified that. Ezra Pound, the great James Joyce, We were all there. We all went through that. I think it did change us, but we weren't lost.
You once wrote that Ezra Pound was right half the time, and when he was wrong, he was so wrong you were never in any doubt about it, and Gertrude Stein was always right.
I didn't write that, did I really?
You did.
I find it hard to believe I would say Gertie was right all the time. She once called my short story, Up in Michigan, inaccrochable, not attainable, because like a painting, you couldn't hang it on a wall. Well, proved her wrong with that story, didn't I? Mm-hmm. And I think Ezra Pound, although he was a great poet, was not as great a poet as Dante. He taught me to never use adjectives. They say the seeds of what we will do are in all of us, but it always seemed to me that in those who make jokes in life, the seeds are covered with better dirt and a higher grade of manure.
You felt pretty strongly towards Gertrude Stein, and in fact, you asked her to be the godmother of one of your boys.
Bumby. Mm-hmm. Bumby, our first child.
Yes.
We were friends for a long time, Gert and I. And it's hard to believe now, but she was a damn pleasant woman. It was Alice who got rid of me. She didn't like me. Ha! But there was... Well, I don't wish to talk about Gertrude's parting.
Shortly thereafter, probably the departure, you had a chance to meet a young, aspiring author named F. Scott Fitzgerald. He'd written The Great Gatsby. How did you find him? How did you meet him, and what did you think of him?
Scotty. When he finally gave me the manuscript to The Great Gatsby, I realized that for all his shortcomings, for his inability to deal with alcohol, anyone who could write as great a novel as The Great Gatsby would surely write another great novel. And that was before I met Zelda. But his work was incredible. And we were friends. And he did help me and inspire me. And I was very fortunate to have him in my life.
How did he do that? How did he inspire you?
He had the ability, probably the most important part was through his writing. I was inspired through his writing. I never liked anyone to look at my writing until it was completely done, my way. Scotty always wanted to help, and he did help in many ways, but he was not always right. But I think I felt inspired because he was in the fast track and had published so much more before me, and so I wanted to keep up.
Zelda and you didn't see eye to eye often.
No, I never trusted her. I thought she led Scotty down the wrong path. I followed for a while too. It didn't help me. It was fiesta every day. It was party every day. And I think she was jealous. Jealous of Scotty's fame. She always seemed to want to pull him away from his writing. I think that's what kept him from writing more until she was finally committed.
After she was committed, did you have any connection with Scott?
I saw him. I saw him enough to know that he was lonely, he was upset, and he drank too much. And it stopped him from writing a lot more. But it told me that I had to be careful of the same problem always wanting to have fun and be in the center of things with all the great parties.
When it came to religion, how was your sense of your relationship to a God?
For my second wife, Pauline, I converted to Catholicism. I think I'm a Catholic. I don't put much faith in the idea of a being out there. What I do know is that life is what has to be lived, and it will give you a curveball just when you're looking for that fastball, and you have to deal with it. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. And the good is what one has faith in and one works towards. And the bad, when it comes, you try not to let it ruin you.
When the bad come, and sometimes in your various novels there were critics, the Max Eastmans, even F. Scott Fitzgerald Scott had some comments, among others, including Gertrude. How did you deal with that?
Critics and scholars are the eunuchs of literature. They're all virtuous and sterile, well-meaning and high-minded, but they have a habit of hanging attributes on you, and when they find you're not that way, accusing you of sailing under false colors. That's how I handle them. Ignore them.
About 1931, a good friend of yours, John Dos Passos, came up with an idea, a suggestion, a change in geography, which led you to move to a place in Florida, little known, called Key West. Why there?
Well, the simple truth is that my wife, Pauline's grandfather, had purchased this house for us, and she felt it would be a great place for us to raise family, and I could write. Mm-hmm. And that's why we got there. I can't say it was a bad place to write. I did enjoy it for a while. But no, wasn't my favorite place.
What did you write during that time period? Do you recall some of the inspired works that came from that period?
In the early years, I started Farewell to Arms and finished it in Montana. To Have and Have Not, as I believe. For Whom the Bell Tolls. Many of the short stories are beginnings of them. The Sun Also Rises had beginnings, but they all had beginnings in various places. Paris, maybe in Piggott, Kansas, or Key West, or some of it at the Finca, or in Spain. I wrote every day. I kept a count of how many words I wrote each day. To write one true sentence takes work. And as soon as you get that, then the work begins.
You mentioned Spain, and again, John Dos Passos is in Spain during the late 30s, and not that you necessarily followed him, but you happened to be at the same place at the same time. What drew you to the Civil War?
It was my belief in the people that they were fighting, what they were fighting for was just, and that they needed the support. The famous fifth column that I wrote about in a play, actually. But I felt that Franco was wrong, and that party should not take away the Spain of the people. That was it, simply. What I learned from that experience is to stay away from politics. There is no justification in politics. It isn't about right or wrong. It's about the party and the politician.
At that time, you had a chance to also work with a guy named Herbert Matthews.
Mm-hmm.
who we know recently has curried favor with the new Generalissimo Fidel Castro. What's your reflections on Herb Matthews?
Well, Herb, the time I spent a little bit in Cuba with Castro, remember that was my home, and it was taken away from me. That's why I have no fond regard for Fidel.
Was it that time when you were seeing the atrocities that were occurred to people that you really started questioning your religion?
It happened the first time.
Yep.
It happened in Italy. I never questioned after that. I saw that it made no difference. Was I to believe that it was a God who saved me and let the Italian next to me die? Was I to believe that war was God's instrument? There was no more for me to examine. Life, the deck of cards, the hand you're dealt, it is what it is. And it's how you live it that's important.
Was part of that living also included your involvement in World War II, where you were not only a reporter, but you were a participant?
They exaggerate. There's no proof that I fought in that war. At least not any concrete proof. WW2. Ernie Hemingstein, I used to call myself, war correspondent. I had a chance to fly on bombing missions in flak so thick you could walk on it. It never changed. It didn't get any easier, let's put it that way.
Did you ever feel the shadow of the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, over your life? Did you suspect that he was looking at you and wondering what you were doing?
You have now reached an area where what I say may offend the nuns and kiddies, especially with J. Edgar Hoover. I have no fond words, nothing nice to say about him, and yes, he did tap my phone. End of story. That's because of what I was doing in Cuba, you understand. Mm-hmm. Helping is what I thought I was doing, but J. Edgar, oh no.
You looked south from Key West towards Cuba. Why? What drew you to the island?
I went fishing. I loved to fish. My third wife, Martha, and I found Havana. It was quite the exciting place. So raw, so earthy, and it was so close. And that's why we went.
As a fisherman, there was certainly that inspired a book which gave you great acclaim. Acclaim perhaps you thought was deserving a long time ago, but sort of eluded you. The Old Man in the Sea brought much to you. Was it expected? Was it received correctly?
No writer who ever won the damn Swedish thing ever wrote anything worth reading after that. Of course I wanted recognition. Of course I was happy that they acknowledged Old Man in the Sea. It is a great story. But I felt I was cursed. The sad truth of it is I didn't want to go to Sweden to get the prize. I wanted to be left alone. I got the acknowledgement, and that was it.
You have references to baseball in that book.
Mm-hmm.
Were you a baseball fan?
I loved baseball. Baseball is a great sport. It's one that's exciting to watch, and it's one full of great statistics. I like numbers that you can deal with that create the image of what's going on. And it is the sport of America. As a sports writer in my early years, it was the reason that I got involved. And it was a wonderful way to earmark, to pinpoint historical moments and events by using great sports characters, Joe DiMaggio, Babe Ruth. It put the people reading my books in a truth that was true.
Was the timing of the fact that Joe DiMaggio had retired in 1951, did that have a reason why he may have found a little more favor in your book?
Perhaps. That's just talk. I don't believe so, no.
Your desire for wanderlust, for excitement, for living outside the normal orthodoxies was part of your charm, and also has resulted in a variety of incidents in your life which have caused you injury and near-death experiences. Can you kind of comment on a couple of those?
2 full-blown plane crashes, a number of car wrecks, and 3 wives. And I lived through it all. That's true. I should have slept more. My life had a tendency to fall apart when I was awake, you know.
You're in Havana. What is it that you see around you in the 50s, which was governed by Fulgencio Batista, that caused or inspired you to take the next level of your artistic life?
It's interesting. I looked at everything. I remember an old couple as we used to drive from the finca down into Havana who lived in a shack just on the outskirts. Nothing. 3 walls, no door. Just an open shack, and they would sit all day in filth and carry garbage back and forth. It was not for me to judge that as wrong as much as to understand it. That's how I did life. That's how I wrote. Understand it. Not my job to judge. That's the tip of the iceberg. Let the reader make decisions. So I did that in everywhere I went, except when the cruelty. And I was for Castro. I wanted him to take Batista out, but I don't know that it made a big difference.
So here we are, your encouragement of Castro. It's now real. We're on the first days of his leadership. Do you fear that things are starting to change and perhaps not rolling out the way you would have liked?
Exactly. Not at all the way I would have liked. It was suggested that we leave until things settled down. I was prepared to stay, but with Mary and our new home and Ketchum to go and stories to finish, I decided to leave. I regret that. I would have fought, but I didn't have that opportunity.
Here we are, 1959 going on 1960, and if I was asked for you to reflect on your 60 years, what would be the legacy of that you would want other people to write about you?
I would like them to say and remember, I wanted to run as a writer. Not as a man who's been to wars, not as a barroom brawler, not as a horse better, not as a drinker. I just wanted to be a writer.
As we conclude our interview today with the great Ernest Hemingway, and it's been a thrill for us to be able to talk to you here, is there one last message you would like to leave for the viewing audience?
I'd like them all to remember to have fun. That's the key. To work hard, to work every day, and to have fun. And to look, to learn, to see, to understand life, and not to judge it. And the icing is have fun. Vaya con Dios, if you have one.
To Ernest Hemingway, we thank you.
My pleasure.